At the turn of the 20th century, international travel was rapidly expanding, and crossing the Atlantic became a fierce race among the world's biggest shipping companies. The White Star Line decided to outbuild everyone. In Belfast, they constructed the Titanic, a massive steel leviathan measuring nearly 882 feet long and weighing over 46,000 tons. It featured electric elevators, Turkish baths, and heated swimming pools. For wealthy passengers, it operated as a floating palace, and for immigrants seeking a new life, it stood as a powerful beacon of hope. Yet precisely 4 days into its maiden voyage, the ship vanished beneath the freezing Atlantic, taking over 1,500 lives with it. While the collision with an iceberg was the immediate trigger, the physical wreckage suggests the disaster resulted from a compounding series of technical and human failures that lay hidden beneath the ship's luxurious exterior. Modern underwater investigations reveal the ship carried systemic vulnerabilities, from the chemistry of its steel to its safety laws, long before it encountered the ice. To understand how the safest ship ever built ended up on the ocean floor, we have to examine the overlooked flaws and critical errors that combined to create a perfect storm of failure. Late on the night of April 14, 1912, the environmental conditions shifted. The ocean became unusually calm, dropping almost completely still. Without wind to push waves against the sides of floating icebergs, there was no whitewater to spot in the darkness. The massive blocks of ice directly ahead of the ship became virtually invisible. Leading up to the collision, the bridge received multiple warnings over their advanced wireless communication system. Nearby ships explicitly reported large, drifting fields of ice directly in Titanic's path. The crew received these messages, yet the ship maintained nearly full speed, pressing forward into the freezing night to stay on schedule. The engineers and officers trusted the immense size of their vessel. That technological confidence turned into a hazard when the crew chose to ignore the clear warnings from the surrounding sea. At 11:40 p.m., the lookouts finally spotted a dark shape directly ahead. The crew immediately reversed the engines and turned, but the iceberg scraped violently along the starboard side of the hull. For decades, it was assumed the ice ripped one enormous hole in the ship. That theory was challenged in 1985, when oceanographer Robert Ballard and his team discovered the wreck 12,500 feet below the surface. This map of the lower hull identifies the specific points of failure found on the wreck. Instead of one continuous tear, the iceberg opened 6 distinct, thin slits spread across different sections of the ship. The steel used during this era contained high levels of sulfur, which caused the metal to lose its flexibility in freezing temperatures. When the iceberg hit, these brittle steel plates shattered like glass instead of bending or denting. These small, brittle fractures allowed seawater to flood 6 separate watertight compartments. Naval architect Thomas Andrews assessed the damage and realized the ship was only engineered to survive the loss of 4. The flooding had already exceeded the ship's physical limits. While structural failure guaranteed the ship would sink, a set of outdated maritime regulations determined how many people would survive. At the time, safety laws dictated the number of lifeboats based on the physical tonnage of the ship, its weight and volume, rather than the actual number of human beings on board. The Titanic was legally compliant with every safety regulation of its day. Yet, because those laws hadn't kept pace with the size of modern liners, the ship lacked the capacity to save more than half of its passengers and crew. To make matters worse, the persistent belief that the ship was unsinkable created a psychological barrier. Many passengers refused to board the early lifeboats, causing them to be lowered away half-filled. The staggering loss of life was the direct result of these regulatory blind spots and the human denial that persisted until the final moments. The water filling the lower decks eventually pulled the bow under. At 2:20 a.m., just 2 hours and 40 minutes after the collision, the Titanic disappeared into the 28-degree water, leaving hundreds to face immediate cold shock and hypothermia. Frantic SOS signals were broadcast across the Atlantic, but the closest vessel capable of helping, the Carpathia, was still hours away. Historians continue to debate the actions of another ship, the Californian, which was much closer but failed to respond in time. In the wake of the disaster, international governments moved to close the safety gaps that the Titanic had exposed. New laws mandated lifeboats for every single passenger, continuous 24-hour radio monitoring, and the creation of international ice patrols to track hazards in the North Atlantic. Millions of people have crossed the ocean safely over the last century because the maritime world was forced to correct the specific failures that led to the Titanic's loss. Today, 12,500 feet below the surface, iron-eating bacteria are slowly consuming the wreck. Eventually, the physical remnants of the ship will disappear entirely. But the enduring legacy of the disaster has less to do with the size of the ship and more to do with the human choices that preceded the collision. It stands as a reminder that technological brilliance cannot eliminate risk, and that a machine's strength is only as reliable as the humility and preparation of those who operate it. If you enjoyed this dive into the forensic history of the Titanic, like the video and subscribe for more true stories. Let us know in the comments. Do you think the disaster was an unavoidable accident or a failure of human judgment? Until next time, always keep questioning history.